Hi, and welcome to episode 80 of the Breaking Bio podcast. I'm Morgan Jackson, a PhD student at the University of Guelph in Ontario, Canada.
I'm Stephen Hamlin, a postdoc at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles.
And this week we're joined by Anne Hilborn, who is a PhD student at Virginia Tech and who is doing all sorts of cool research in Africa, and I think we're going to be talking all about it, as well as she's been doing a lot of really, really good outreach work on Twitter and various places online. So, Anne, thank you very much for joining us today. You want to tell everybody at home a little bit about yourself and about your research?
Thanks for having me. Yeah, so I work in Tanzania, and I work on predator-prey interactions, and I magically get to work on them with cheetahs, which are some of the most cool animals in the world. And so I did quite a few years working in Serengeti after my undergrad, and now I got to go back as part of my PhD research to watch them. Mostly sleep, but I was trying to watch them hunt, but I spent a lot of time watching them sleep. But yeah, the field work is fantastic, and it's what I really love. But I also love being able to think about how they interact with their prey and with the predators that prey on them as well, and the whole ecosystem.
You know, I don't want to derail this right off the bat, but I'm going to anyways.
Yes.
I've always been under the impression that people working with, like the big cats or the great apes, the really charismatic ones, that it's extremely competitive to be like a PhD student working on that. Am I right, or is that?
You're definitely on the right track. Yeah, it's not an easy position to get into. And I was extremely lucky in that I was able to go to Serengeti when I was a kid and sort of tagging along with my family and met people there who worked on cheetahs, and sort of stayed in touch. And so when I left undergrad, it just happened that the previous research assistant for the Serengeti Cheetah project was leaving, and I sort of weaseled my way in that way. But that's not a way that's really accessible to a lot of people. So
yeah, because I'm not going to lie to you, and I'm sorry, Morgan, but nobody's climbing over the bodies of fellow grad students to work on flies, right? Like, cheetahs are where it's at.
It's pretty true. There wasn't a lot of competition.
I mean, my wife has no idea what I do on a daily basis, but we saw a talk once on the big cats, and she hasn't stopped talking about it for 10 years. So.
They do have this ability to inspire and capture the imagination, which makes my vague attempts at outreach a lot easier than if I was working on yeast or microbes or something, I think. So.
At least you're honest about it, not trying to hide it. That is this super difficult mountain to climb.
No, it's, as with, unfortunately, a number of things in science, it's not necessarily what you know, but who you know. So, yeah.
Oh, that's good. I mean, it's excellent, and if you can get into the field and you use the resources and opportunities that you're given and make the most out of them, so it's a good lesson for everybody to not be afraid to try things if they're new. So I'm going to try and get things back on track now that Stephen has ended to derail things.
Oh yes, I derailed our super focused and tightly narrative interview strategy.
Yeah, you haven't been around here for a while, Stephen. I don't know. You haven't noticed it, that how
you went all pro. You sold out on me, did you? All right.
Exactly. So you mentioned that you were following cheetahs around all day, and by following you mean sitting in the shade watching them sleep a lot of the time. What was it that you were doing following them? What was it that you were hoping to catch them in the act of?
So I was hoping to catch them hunting, because one of the data types I wanted to collect was sort of the time in between successful hunts and also unsuccessful hunts, to look at the rate which they attack prey. And so my naive idea was that I'd be able to just find a cheetah and then stick with it for days at a time. And even though I'd already done 3 years of field research on them, I thought I knew what I was doing, but it turns out that I didn't, because they move at night, which I didn't realize. And so I'd follow them all day and then leave them when it was dark and then drive off and camp somewhere. And then I'd come back in the morning and then gone. And then I'd spend another 6 hours trying to find them and couldn't find them. So that really threw a spanner in my data collection plan about 3 months in. But yeah, I was sitting all day with them watching, sort of waiting for them to hunt. I was recording prey densities every 15 minutes in a 1 kilometer radius around them, recording their movements and their activity, which is usually sleeping. As they do.
So when you say Sorry, when you say talking about trying to estimate their prey density, are you literally scanning the horizon with binoculars and seeing how many wildebeest or impala or various other potential prey items are in the neighborhood?
Yeah, exactly. So I had my binoculars, and I would do a sort of 180-degree scan of the horizon, and I actually tried to count or estimate every single herbivore there was. And sometimes you can't see for a kilometer, so then I'd estimate how far away my actual view was. Because it's just doing different types of surveys is hard when there's possibly thousands, and you're doing thousands of ungulates, and you're trying to do it every 15 minutes. So I went for the total count option.
So you're actually, like, you don't have any tags on the cheetahs or anything. You're just actually following them around the Serengeti, hoping to spot them, and then, like paparazzi stalking their prey.
Pretty much. I mean, every cheetah has different individually identifiable spots, so you can recognize individuals. So you sort of find one, figure out who it was, and then sit with him or her all day, and then hope you find them again, and then sort of use your ID cards to figure out who it was. But yeah, you'd sort of park 30 to 40 meters away and just sit there all day and take lots of pictures.
Nice. And how about the names? Do you guys have standardized names, or you calling this one Bob and that one's?
So they all get sort of a number letter combination, which is very boring, and then we name them. And the Serengeti Cheetah Project has been going on for 30 years. And so there's a lot of names that have been used, but there's a number of traditions that have developed. The first guy who worked on them, Tim Caro, had the idea to name them all after London tube stations. So I'm going through this historical data, and sort of like Liverpool Street and Balham are popping up. And they're not particularly nice cheetah names. But in the sort of 90s, Tanzania was going through sort of times of really hard economic sanctions and hardship, and so it was difficult to get supplies. So researchers become exceedingly focused on food in times like that. So we have these lineages of cheetahs that are the nut lineages and the candy lineage and the cheese lineage, alcohol lineage. And we try to keep that going even though times are easier. So I tried to name. So we had one named Amaretto that I named her 2 cubs, Pims and Brandy. Alcohol is
really
great. So many options. We pretty much run out of nuts. Like we had to go to butternut, which is, I think, really low down. It was
Just
not really
the bottom of the barrel on that one.
Yeah, we're scraping the bottom of the barrel, so maybe butternut won't have cubs. And then there was also male pairs, because you don't always know who their mother is, tended to be named after actors that current research assistant was particularly attracted to. So.
I was going to actually ask about that, because I haven't noticed the amarettos and the nuts. Perhaps they didn't stick in my mind as well. But as I'm following your Twitter stream for the last several months, I've certainly come across. I think today you were talking about Ewan and McGregor.
I was indeed, yes.
Really?
And Bradley and Cooper were 2 that I named this past trip around. And there was also a Richard and Armitage this past trip around. It's been suggested that I mature slightly and stop doing that, but yeah.
I think those are awesome names. I'm not going to lie.
I'm curious. So it's like,
I actually tried contacting the actors to tell them that, and I got no response.
Yeah.
Who isn't excited to know there's cheetahs in the Serengeti named after them? Aaron.
That's a photo op if I've ever seen one. I was actually curious about something you said. So you said you don't always know who the mothers are. Is that because you're just not recording the mating interactions, or because of extra pair copulations?
It's usually because males sort of wander into our study area from outside, and so we don't know. They suddenly turn up as adults, and we never saw them as cubs. It's also because cub mortality is really high. It's about 95% between birth and independence, and so there's a lot of turnover in cubs. And usually there's only 1 or 2 people out there in the Serengeti trying to find all the animals in the population. So we miss cubs, and we miss sort of animals, especially if they're out the edge of our range, and they pop in every once in a while. We might not see them as cubs, even if they were sort of in the area.
You mean you guys are under-resourced and don't have the money to track every cheetah in the Serengeti? Oh.
Oddly enough, no.
You're going to need to get those actors out there and do an ice bucket challenge or something.
Well, yes, it has its ups and downs getting the celebrities involved.
Something interesting is we always, I mean, cheetahs are one of those sterling examples for conservation and how people are always saying there's like no cheetahs left and they're super bottlenecked and they're in trouble and all this stuff. And I don't want to be, the whole it's snowing here, how come climate change is a thing. But you guys seem to have a lot of them in the area. Is this kind of indicative? Is this like a really, well-preserved area for cheetahs, or is this, something where they're not struggling as hard as perhaps in other places?
It's a combination of those things. The greater Serengeti ecosystem is massive, and it's one of the most well-protected and intact ecosystems in Eastern Africa. And so there are a lot of cheetahs there, but a lot is a relative amount. I mean, we estimate that the amount of cheetahs in between Masai Mara in Kenya and Serengeti is only about 200 to 300. And that's a very nice, healthy population, but it's not that many in the grand scheme of things. And there's a lot of trouble actually estimating cheetahs because they're really hard to find and they're hard to count. And the reason that they're so well studied in Serengeti is because Serengeti has these amazing open grasslands where you can actually find cheetahs. But once you get into the woodlands, which is sort of the majority of the habitat in Eastern Africa, and if they're scared of humans, there's no way you can survey them. We don't really have a particularly great idea of how many there are outside of our ecosystem and in general. So the estimates are pretty fuzzy, but there's not that many because they need a lot of space, and as all over the world, habitat is diminishing. So Serengeti's a stronghold, but I wouldn't say that they're necessarily flourishing anywhere outside of it that I know of.
Right. Not so representative of the big picture.
Well, yeah. The problem is the picture is so fuzzy. I wish we knew more about it, but possibly not representative of the big picture.
Is there any current work being done on the genetics of these populations?
Yes, actually, one of my first, when I first went in 2004 to Serengeti to be a research assistant, one of my major jobs was to pick up poop to do genetics, which is very, very glamorous, let me tell you. So now, at the moment, I spend so much time watching them, waiting them for to hunt. Back then, I used to wait for them to poop, and they do that as infrequently as they hunt. So that was also a waiting game. But yeah, we were trying to figure out what sort of males were actually mating with the females. So there's sort of two broad types of cheetah males. There's either your territorial ones or your nomadic ones. And we don't really know why there are two types, what are the various strategies, and who has more reproductive success. So we tried to collect the poo from all of the females in the population and all of the cubs, and then as many males as we could. And then look at paternity. And one of the really cool things that came out of that was that cubs within a litter will have different fathers. And so it looks like female cheetahs are doing some sort of sexual strategy to really, really broaden the base of males they're mating with, which may really help with this genetic bottleneck idea, which I'm not convinced, honestly, but I'm not an expert in it, so I don't want to mouth off about it.
But don't take my word for it. I'm about as far from a cheetah expert or geneticist as you can possibly get. So my undergrad education may be coming back to bite me in the ass here.
Well, yes, and me too. And undergrad education in genetics was a long time ago now, and things have changed. So.
Well, cheetahs are held up as a standard example of population bottlenecks, but
Yeah, but I need to go back and read the paper, but I'm not sure that those DNA were actually taken from wild populations. I think they might have been taken from zoo populations. And it's true that I'm on thin ice here, but I think that it's true that cheetahs are very homozygous in a lot of loci, but that's not necessarily a sign that they're doing poorly. Like, they have really high reproductive ability in the wild. And this is my non-geneticist person coming out here, but their spots are very different. Like when you spend a lot of time watching Serengeti cheetahs, you can see that certain lineages have different types of spots. And if they were really, really inbred, I'm not sure that would happen. I don't know. I wish I knew more about this, but
population bottlenecks don't necessarily lead to a decline in reproductive fitness.
Okay.
I mean, hell, the Quebecois are really inbred, and they seem to be fine. But hey, they are.
Good to know.
The Quebecois are another standard example of population bottlenecks. Don't give me that look, Morgan.
I apologize to any of the Quebecois audience that's possibly listening to this. Stephen is not implying too much beyond that, I hope.
No, this is exactly the opposite, right? I mean, they're perfectly fine. It's just that you can actually detect a huge signature of the bottleneck in their genes. You know what I mean? But like, you can actually detect the signature in them, and it's quite strong. But it's not,
a detrimental thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think where I was going wrong is I was assuming those two were linked. And so there was a genetic bottleneck, but it doesn't necessarily have perhaps the detrimental effects that people assume that sometimes, because the inbreeding hasn't happened yet.
I mean, humans underwent a bottleneck too.
When they went out of Africa? Is that?
Yeah, before they out of Africa. I'm going to get the population sizes wrong, but I think it was somewhere in the order of 10,000 at one point. I'd have to go back and reread those papers, but yeah.
Yeah. As you can tell, I'm not an expert on this. Probably stuck my foot in my mouth.
I'm not either, but I hang out with a lot of population geneticists around here, so.
One up on me then.
No worries. How about we move back to the field side of this then, where we're feeling more comfortable. So I'm really intrigued by your observations of you think you're seeing maybe some spots and patternings, staying tracked or through lineages there. How quickly did you learn your spots, to spot the spots, you may say, for some of these cheetahs?
Okay, that was lame. I'm sorry.
Shut up, Steve.
I am not particularly good at it, so I thought that there was about maybe 6 to 10 individuals that I could look at and recognize, usually because they have some sort of distinctive spot pattern, like a big double spot on a certain part of, like on their hind leg. But other people I know who are better at cheetah field research were much better at identifying patterns by eye. I found it really helpful when cheetahs had scars or like a kinky tail. We had one named Carol who had about 6 inches of white tip on her tail, and she was very distinctive. But you could sort of see different types of patterns in the spots, and sort of think to yourself, well, that looks like it might be from the nut family or the alcohol family. I wasn't always right, but it was good to sort of narrow it down initially and then start looking at those ID cards to see if it came from that lineage or not.
I can see Stephen's analytical computer brain reasoning that he's going to start figuring out how to computer ID these spot patterns.
Well, sorry, the problem you're describing actually sounds like it could be solvable.
See, field researchers not needed after Stephen talks to them on a podcast.
You need to actually quantify if there's similarities of spots within lineages.
Well, yeah. We'll talk about it later. I don't want to get into this in the middle of the podcast because we'll go forever. Actually, one stereotype that people who have never been to the Serengeti have, I'm sure, is the problem with poachers and such. So I'm curious. You've been in the area a long time. How much of that is real? What kind of experiences have you had? I don't know.
The poaching is varied sort of over the years, and it depends on species. So cheetahs in the Serengeti don't really have a problem with being poached, but other ungulate species are getting severely affected, especially up in the north where there's a lot of cover and there's not particularly that many tourists or roads, and so there's just the park staff can't necessarily cover that much area. So I was pretty lucky. I didn't see much evidence of poaching. I did see a dead elephant and almost freaked out because it because it had its tusks sawn off, and it was in the center of Serengeti, and I was really, really concerned that it had been poached, and so I called someone I knew at the Frankfurt Zoological Society who was they were actually doing the aerial census for elephants at the time. And I called him up, and my voice went all high and jittery about it. And he said, no, we spotted that elephant. The rangers came and took its tusks. It died naturally. It's okay. Because I was camping out, and you don't necessarily get worried about animals when you're camping out, but the idea of humans being around really is quite scary. And so the idea that there might have been poachers was not a happy thought on many levels.
That's actually a good point. I mean, have you gotten up close and personal with the cheetahs?
They do. There's certain cheetahs, which sometimes it also runs in families, that are very, very comfortable around cars. In general, the population is comfortable around cars, which is why we can even do our research. But there are occasional cheetahs that will jump on your car. And so, especially when they're young, they're much more inquisitive. And so they'll jump on your car, and it's utterly amazing to have them stare at you through the windscreen, because they don't seem to see you, and so they're sort of like staring at their own reflection, and they leave snot trails all over it, and sometimes they turn around and pee all over the windscreen. It's a little terrifying. They're really blank, and yet you realize they're a large carnivore, and they're not very far away from you. And so I do sort of shrink back a bit when that happens, as cool as it is. So yeah, you can get quite close.
Wow.
I'm just imagining you're washing off your car later. That's cheetah pee, no big.
Yeah, you have these streaks coming there, because it dries and crystallizes.
Oh, that's going to be hard to explain to the rental company. I don't even know how you do that. I don't know where that came from, sir. I honestly don't know. That's not.
Yeah. Well, that wasn't me. No.
So, before we get into the social media stuff, because we're talking about field stories, somebody who spent as much time in the field as you have has got to have one or two really amazing and enlightening and hilarious stories. So do you have a favorite story from your time in the field that you feel like sharing or are able to share, perhaps?
The problem is I've often tried to tell this story, and it really falls flat because people don't realize how hard it is to collect a poop sample. So,
we have a scientifically literate audience.
It's an amazing story about struggling to collect a poop sample. So sitting with this young cheetah all day and waiting and waiting and waiting for her to poop. And then she jumped on top of my car, actually, and sat there for a long time, which is great, but it also means you can't really see her. And so you sort of crane your neck out the window and like look in all your mirrors and try to keep track and see if she's still there, because you don't want to drive off when she's still and so it was getting towards dark, and I needed to sort of go, and so eventually she got off, and so I drove away to find somewhere to camp, and I got out and I went to put up. So on top of our Land Rovers we have roof tents, and that's where we sleep. So I went up to open my roof tent, and there on top of my roof tent was this perfectly enclosed little poop that she had left. And I was just so happy, because usually when they poop on the grasslands, poop is really hard to see in the grass. And if they poop 40 meters away, you sort of take a picture of the patch of grass, and then you have to go find it, which doesn't sound hard, but sometimes they don't leave the area for a couple hours. So you sort of need to keep track of the cheetah, keep track of the place they pooped an hour ago, and then as they leave, you try to drive over to where the poop is, position the car between poop and the cheetah so you can look for the poop without the cheetah seeing you. And then you look for the poop, and it's not easy, and so I ended up sniffing for it most of the time, which involves bent over in the long grass, crouched in circles, and sniffing for poop, which is not always successful, and so sometimes you just really, really want an easy poop. Occasionally I would have to do this in front of tourists, wearing plastic gloves. And I can't imagine what their tour guys are telling them about what I was doing.
You just don't see that on TV very often.
No, you don't. And the lives of the researchers don't really come out. So basically, the point I'm trying to get across is an easy poop is fabulous, and I sort of did a little happy dance on top of my Range Rover.
Yeah.
I've told the story to non-scientific audiences, and they sort of go,
Yeah, the point I took away from that is I'm glad I never became a field biologist.
But this is the best part. This is why field biology is so fun.
This is why field biologists are weird.
Yes. One of the many, many reasons why we're so weird is because we get really happy about poop.
Surprisingly, field research not as glamorous as it's made out to be in the movies.
Oh, no. No, it is not.
Okay, so I think this is a perfect segue into this next topic because that was a great story and you told it very, very well. And this brings us to all the work that you've been doing on Twitter, telling stories about your research and the things that you've been seeing out while you're spending so much time in your truck. It's been an absolute joy to follow you, for me at least, for the last, I don't even know how long it's been. It's been like a year or so that I've been following you through most of your field work, and now you're back and doing all this stuff and analyzing your data. And I just want you to comment on how you are approaching all this outreach that you're doing.
So I sort of was pushed into joining Twitter by one of my supervisors. Because I've always been a very sort of anti this sort of thing. Like, I didn't join Facebook until I was about 30. And so I was always very skeptical about social media and technology and things like that. But then my supervisor sort of pushed me to join, and so I didn't do anything on it for a while because I didn't feel I had anything to say. And then I went to the field. And then I realized I had this incredible opportunity to share pictures and share stories about fieldwork, and because the oddity of my life in Tanzania is that I had very little electricity. I only had solar power and I had no running water, but I had internet connection while I was sitting with cheetahs through the cell phone network. So I bought my first smartphone and then live tweeted a lot of my fieldwork. And I tried to approach it in a humorous, snarky sort of way, because you get a lot of the basics in nature documentaries, but you don't get the nitty-gritty, the dirty, the ugly, the boring stuff that actually makes up fieldwork and the bloody stuff that comes along with working on carnivores. So those are the things I try to emphasize in my outreach.
No, I think it's brilliant. Like, I don't think people realize that, they see, cheetahs taking out things on nature documentaries and stuff, and it, super run fast, takes it out, game over, cut to the next scene. Yeah. But you've been doing a really good job of showing how freaking hard it is for cheetahs to actually do that, and pardon the personification here, but how brutal that is to our human sensibilities about how some of these kills go down. Yeah. I think it's great. I've learned a hell of a lot from it. But have you faced any backlash from people for showing all this graphic content?
Not much. I mean, I've tried to be a little bit sensitive about not showing the really gross stuff, or at least putting some warnings beforehand. The only time I've gotten backlash is when I've wanted to put those sort of pictures in reports for donors. I think they're great, but my boss was like, no. You got to show cute pictures. You can't show pictures with blood all over their face tearing apart a gazelle. But I think on social media, people see a lot of graphic content, and so it's not necessarily all that shocking. I mean, I get a couple comments about, oh, the poor gazelle, or something like that, but it's actually less bad. Like, maybe the strident animal rights people haven't found me or something, but there's been a lot less backlash than I feared, in a way. Most people seem really enthusiastic like you, which is great.
So you brought up an interesting point there, and I guess it ties in. Do you see this kind of, I'm going to coin a bad word here, the Disneyfication of nature documentaries and the censoring of some of this real world stuff? Like you just said, your donors aren't exposed to it in these reports and such. Do you see that as being a good thing, or is this, only shining the good light on the stuff, perhaps misleading, or do you think you could do more if you showed the full real process?
I don't know. I think a lot of people really like cats because they're beautiful and they think they're gorgeous and lovely and cute, and they like not having to think about the fact that they are carnivores and have to eat and tear apart other cute, lovely animals. And so the donors are usually not scientists, and they're usually coming from that mentality. And I'm not sure that changing their perception through showing them lots of gory pictures will necessarily help. I mean, I just don't know. Like, yeah, that's something I haven't really, and I haven't talked. They keep me away from the donors because I'm not very polished, and so I haven't really talked to donors about the realities of predation, the realities of cheetah, and whether that would change if they gave money to conservation organizations or not. I don't know. But I think in general a greater understanding by the public and and even other scientists about how predation works would be helpful. But I don't know.
Oh, that's fair enough. Although I'm going to go on the record and say you should be at all the donor meetings because screw polished. You've got all the skills necessary to totally get people on board for cheetah research. I would sign up for cheetah research, and I don't even like things with backbones. So
I've managed to offend my share of rich men, so I'm not sure I really should be up there.
I think you're doing it right then. That sounds like you're exactly on track.
Yes, unfortunately, they're the ones with the money, and so I've got a lot to learn when it comes to schmoozing rich people, I gotta admit.
I don't know. Stories about sniffing cheetah poo in Serengeti sounds like an amazing way to get people to donate. I think that would work.
Yeah, self-selected sample here, right?
Yeah, if scientists were really rich and could give lots of money to other scientists, I'd be in.
All right. Well, we're pretty much out of time, so we might as well leave it on that high note. I don't see this peaking anywhere else. So can you let everybody at home who's listening where they can find you online and keep up with all your work and fieldwork adventures post and past?
So my most active, the most sort of up-to-date place to reach me is on Twitter, which is Anne W. Hilborn. I have a web page. Let's see if I can remember it. I think it's Anne Hilborn at moonfruit.com, and that's where I've posted a lot of pictures, and that's where I keep blogs of my time in the field. The blogs are not super updated at the moment because I've been stuck in academia, but there's a lot of information about my research and some nicely gory pictures you can check out there. And then I also have a Facebook page that the public can look at my stuff from the field, so there's a lot of pictures I posted there.
Awesome. We'll be sure to have links to all of Anne's various websites and social media channels on our website, which is at breakingbio.com. So you can go there and link your way through and check out all the great work that Anne has been doing. I think that's about it. I want to thank you very much, Anne, for joining us this week. It was a lot of fun talking to you, and I look forward to following the adventures of Ewan and McGregor and all the various foods and beverages that are roaming the Serengeti for many years to come, I hope. So.
Thanks so much for having me. This was great.
No problem. And so everybody listening at home, like I said, you can find us online by searching for the Breaking Bio podcast on Facebook. You can follow us at Breaking Bio on Twitter. We're also on iTunes and Stitcher. If you want to take the podcast along with you, you can search for us, the Breaking Bio podcast there. And as always, we need to thank the European Society for Evolutionary Biology for lending us some, we'll say that we're kind of legit now that they give us a little bit of money. This is what happens when we get funding. We get cool people like Anne on board. So thank you very much to them. And thank you, everybody, for listening. And I hope you'll join us next time when we have a new guest, probably with less cheetah poop.
Too bad.
Too bad is right. Thank you very much, Anne.
Thank you.